The morning sun poured through the enormous glass windows of Veyron Dynamics, turning the polished office floors golden as hundreds of employees hurried toward their desks. Nobody noticed the quiet young woman standing near the reception desk, nervously clutching a cheap canvas bag and wearing a simple white blouse with a small intern badge pinned to her chest. Her name was Seraphina Vale, but that morning, nobody knew she was the woman who owned the company. She had come disguised as an intern for one reason: she wanted to see what her employees were really like when they believed the boss was nowhere near them. Within 20 minutes, she would discover something far worse than poor management. She would discover how easily people could humiliate someone they believed was powerless. And before the sun reached its highest point, one exhausted black single father would risk his own career to defend a stranger everyone else had decided was not worth protecting. If you believe kindness can change a person's life and that everyone deserves a second chance, take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. Because sometimes the person we ignore is carrying a story we cannot see. Seraphina had deliberately dressed differently from the woman whose photographs appeared in business magazines. Gone was the tailored designer suit, the expensive watch, and the confidence that normally made executives straighten when she entered a room. She had spent the previous evening studying employee schedules, department reports, and anonymous workplace complaints. One particular complaint had stayed in her mind. Several junior workers had described the company as cold and intimidating, where managers praised numbers but ignored people. Seraphina had promised herself she would find out whether those words were true. She expected awkwardness. She expected pressure. She never expected what happened next. A senior manager named Garrick Sloan noticed her standing beside the reception desk and immediately assumed she was another inexperienced trainee. He looked her over with open irritation, then handed her a thick stack of documents that had been deliberately left unfinished. Instead of explaining the assignment, he ordered her to organize years of invoices before the afternoon meeting. When Seraphina quietly asked where the files belonged, Garrick laughed loudly enough for several employees to hear. He mocked her for not knowing something so basic and told her that people like her were lucky to even have a chair in the building. A few employees lowered their eyes. Others watched with uncomfortable amusement. Seraphina felt the familiar sting of humiliation, but she remained silent because she needed to understand what kind of culture allowed someone to behave that way. Then Garrick knocked the stack of papers from her hands. The documents scattered across the floor like white leaves in a storm. Seraphina immediately bent down to gather them, her cheeks burning. Garrick continued criticizing her while people watched from their desks. Nobody moved. Nobody wanted to become his next target. But then someone stood up from the far side of the office. His name was Malik Rowan, a black single father who worked in the logistics department. He was wearing a gray suit that had been carefully pressed despite the faint wear around the cuffs. He had arrived early that morning after dropping his 8-year-old daughter at school, and he had already worked several hours before most employees finished their coffee. Malik walked toward Seraphina and began helping her collect the papers. He did not care that Garrick was watching. He did not care that several employees had suddenly become interested in their computer screens. What mattered to him was the person sitting on the floor, trying desperately to keep her dignity. He quietly gathered the scattered pages and helped organize them into the correct order. Then he placed the stack back into her hands and stood beside her instead of walking away. His decision seemed small, but to Seraphina it felt enormous. For the first time that morning, someone had treated her like a human being instead of an inconvenience. Garrick became furious. He reminded Malik that he had no authority to interfere and threatened to report him to human resources. Malik remained calm, explaining through his actions that respect should never depend on someone's job title. He knew exactly what it meant to be judged before being understood. Years earlier, after his wife died unexpectedly, Malik had become the sole parent of his young daughter. He had nearly lost his apartment, worked overnight shifts, studied during lunch breaks, and fought every day to give his child a stable life. He had learned that dignity was not something a company could give or take away. It was something people protected for one another. Seraphina watched him carefully. She noticed the exhaustion behind his eyes, the small photograph of his daughter tucked inside his wallet, and the way he kept checking the time because he had promised to call her during lunch. This man had nothing to gain by defending an intern. In fact, he had everything to lose. Yet he had stepped forward anyway. Around noon, Seraphina was asked to attend the executive meeting as an assistant. Garrick confidently entered the conference room, expecting the usual presentation. Malik returned to his department, believing the incident was finished. Then the doors opened, and the entire room fell silent. Seraphina walked in wearing the same simple clothes, but this time the CEO followed behind her. Garrick's expression changed instantly. Seraphina placed the intern badge on the conference table. She calmly revealed that she was not an intern at all. She was Seraphina Vale, founder and CEO of Veyron Dynamics, and she had spent the entire morning observing the company without anyone knowing her identity. She explained that the documents Garrick had thrown were not ordinary invoices. They were part of an internal leadership evaluation. More importantly, the cameras and employee reports had confirmed exactly what she feared. People were afraid to challenge cruelty because they believed their careers depended on silence. Garrick was removed from his management position that afternoon after an investigation began. But Seraphina did something unexpected. She called Malik into the executive office and offered him a promotion. Malik initially hesitated, believing he was being rewarded simply for doing what was right. Seraphina explained that she was not promoting him because he rescued her. She was promoting him because he protected another human being when nobody was watching. Several months later, Veyron Dynamics looked different. Managers were trained to lead with empathy. Employees had confidential ways to report mistreatment. New workers were welcomed instead of intimidated. And Malik became one of the company's strongest leaders while continuing to raise his daughter with the same quiet determination that had carried him through his hardest years. Seraphina never forgot that morning. She had entered the company disguised as an intern hoping to discover what was wrong with her business. Instead, she discovered the kind of person every successful company desperately needs, someone brave enough to do the right thing when there is absolutely nothing to gain from doing it. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need a little hope today. Special request: before you leave, comment, "Kindness has no title," if you believe every person deserves dignity, no matter their position, appearance, or circumstances. Because sometimes the greatest test of character happens when we think nobody important is watching. And sometimes, the person we believe has the least power is the one who shows us what real strength looks like.